The convoy was never supposed to stop. On that road, in that fog, men like Ramon Ortega didn't slow down for screams. They erased them. Yet the moment the brakes screamed and the black cars froze in place, something had already gone wrong. A barefoot little girl burst out of the mist, blood on her feet, rope burns on her wrists, eyes wild with terror. She threw herself in front of the lead car and screamed a sentence that cut through every rule Ramon lived by. "My mother is hanging from a tree, and they said they'd come back to kill me." Ramon stepped out of the car, not to help, not out of mercy, but because he recognized that kind of fear, the kind that doesn't lie. What the girl didn't know was the woman she was trying to save had seen something she was never meant to see. And by stopping that convoy, Ramon wasn't just saving a life. He was stepping into a trap, one that would expose a traitor, ignite a silent war, and turn a ruthless crime lord's greatest strength into his most dangerous weakness. The fog rolled low across the forest road, thick enough to swallow sound, thick enough to erase direction. It wrapped itself around the convoy like a living thing, pressing against black metal and tinted glass, muting the world into something unreal. 3 black Mercedes moved in perfect formation, engines humming with restrained power, headlights cutting pale tunnels through the gray. This road belonged to no one, and to men like Ramon Ortega, that meant it belonged to him. The convoy was not late. It was never early. It moved only when Ramon decided it would. Then the brakes screamed. The lead car came to a violent stop, tires skidding slightly on the damp asphalt. The 2 cars behind it halted in perfect sync, engines dropping to a low, irritated growl, like caged animals suddenly denied their prey. For a brief, disbelieving second, no one spoke. In front of the lead car, a small figure collapsed onto the road. She looked like she had been torn out of the fog itself. A little girl, no more than 8 or 9, barefoot, trembling. Her dress once pink but now streaked with mud so dark it looked almost black. Her knees hit the asphalt hard, skin splitting, blood mixing with rainwater. She didn't cry at first. She gasped, lungs fighting for air, chest heaving as if each breath hurt. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Boss." The rear door of the lead Mercedes opened before the sentence could finish. Ramon Ortega stepped out. He moved with the calm precision of a man who had never needed to hurry in his life. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit tailored so perfectly it looked like it had grown around him. He surveyed the road without expression. Fog clung to his polished shoes. Cold air brushed against the tattoos climbing from beneath his open collar, ink that told stories no one sane would ask him to explain. This was not what stopped him. What stopped him was the child. She lifted her head slowly, eyes red and swollen, pupils blown wide with terror. When she looked at Ramon, something in her broke completely. She crawled the last step toward him and collapsed at his feet, small hands clutching at the fabric of his trousers like they were the last solid thing left in the world. They hung my mom?" She sobbed. The words came apart as she spoke them, fractured by shaking breaths. "They tied her up, on a tree, and they made me watch." The fog swallowed her voice, but the sentence landed anyway. Ramon didn't move. He didn't kneel. He didn't touch her. He simply looked down, up close. The details were impossible to ignore. The angry red welts circling her wrists, perfectly shaped, perfectly brutal, rope burns, fresh. The kind left by someone who wanted pain to last longer than fear. Dirt ground under her fingernails, tiny cuts on her feet from running over gravel and broken branches. This was not theater. This was not a staged plea designed to slow a convoy worth millions. This was real. One of the men behind him shifted, hand hovering near the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. "Boss," he said quietly. "This could be a setup." Ramon raised one hand. Silence fell instantly. The child's crying filled the space instead, raw and unfiltered. The sound of a body that had been running on adrenaline and terror for far too long. She tried to speak again. Failed. Then forced the words out through clenched teeth. "Please," she whispered. "They said they'd come back. They said if anyone tried to help, they'd kill me too." Ramon's gaze dropped to her wrists again. For a fraction of a second, so brief no one but him noticed his jaw tightened. A memory rose uninvited. Sharp and unwelcome. Another road. Another night. Another child. Smaller than this one. Lying still because no one had stopped. Because everyone had decided it was safer to keep moving. He had buried that memory deep. He had built an empire on top of it. He looked past the girl, into the forest. The fog between the trees was thicker there, darker, as if something inside it was holding its breath. How far, he asked. The girl flinched at the sound of his voice, then realized he was speaking to her. She pointed with a shaking hand toward the wall of trees. Not far. I ran and ran until I fell. Ramon didn't hesitate. Take point, he said to his men. Weapons ready. They stared at him. No one questioned Ramon Ortega. But this was different. This was not business. This was not territory or debt or power. This was a detour, and detours got people killed. Still, they moved. The engines cut. Doors closed softly. The fog swallowed the convoy as if it had never existed. Ramon turned back to the girl. She had gone very still, watching him like he might vanish if she blinked. You lead, he said. She shook her head frantically. I can't walk anymore. Her legs gave out again, and she pitched forward. Ramon caught her without thinking, one arm wrapping around her small frame, lifting her effortlessly off the ground. She weighed almost nothing. Too little. He felt her heart racing against his chest, wild and panicked, like a trapped bird. Hold on, he said. It was not gentle. It was not cruel. It was a command. She obeyed, arms wrapping around his neck, face burying into his shoulder. Her tears soaked into his expensive suit jacket. He ignored it. The forest closed around them as they stepped off the road. Branches clawed at fabric. Roots twisted underfoot. The temperature dropped sharply, the fog growing so thick it felt solid, pressing in from all sides. Ramon's men moved with practiced precision, scanning shadows, reading broken leaves and disturbed earth like a language they'd been fluent in for years. The girl whispered directions into his shoulder, voice hoarse, breath uneven. Each word tightened something in his chest he hadn't realized was still there. They emerged into a clearing. The tree stood at its center, ancient and gnarled, branches spreading wide like judgment. And hanging from one of those branches was a woman. The girl screamed. Ramon tightened his grip, turning her face away instantly. Don't look. This time, there was no mistaking it. This was not just an order. It was protection. His men were already moving, climbing, cutting, catching the limp body as it fell. Someone shouted that she was alive. Barely. Ramon felt the child in his arms collapse against him, her scream dissolving into broken sobs. He looked at the woman on the ground, mud-streaked, bruised, rope burns biting deep into her skin. A stranger, or so he thought. As they worked to save her, the woman's eyes fluttered open for a brief, dangerous second. Her gaze slid unfocused across the clearing, and then stopped on Ramon. Recognition flashed there. Shock. And something else. Before darkness claimed her again, her lips parted, and she breathed a single word. Ortega. Ramon went very still. He had not told her his name. And in that moment, standing in a forest that smelled of wet earth and violence, holding a child who had trusted the wrong man with her life, Ramon Ortega did not yet understand the truth. The woman he had just saved had seen a secret powerful enough to tear his empire apart from the inside. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. The clearing held its breath. Fog curled low around the ancient oak, as if unwilling to witness what had already been done beneath its branches. The woman lay on the damp ground, her body unnaturally still, dark rope burns biting into pale skin, wrists twisted at angles that spoke of pain sustained far longer than mercy allowed. Ramon stood a few steps away, the child still clinging to him, her small fingers tangled in the fabric of his suit like she was afraid the world would tear him away if she let go. She's alive, Victor said. Fingers pressed to the woman's neck. His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. Pulse is weak. Shock. Exposure. Ramon nodded once. He had already seen it. The shallow rise of her chest. The faint tremor that meant life hadn't fully abandoned her yet. Relief never came. Relief was dangerous. It made men careless. "Get her down," he said. They moved quickly, efficiently. Mateo supported the woman's weight while Diego cut the remaining fibers of rope embedded into bark. Victor stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, covering the bruises, the marks that would linger long after the pain faded if she lived long enough for them to matter. The girl tried to break free from Ramon's arms. Mama Ramon adjusted his hold, turning her face firmly into his shoulder. "She's here," he said. "She's breathing. But she... Don't look." Again. It wasn't softness. It was certainty. And somehow, that certainty steadied her. She obeyed, her sobs muffled against his chest, small body shaking with the aftermath of terror finally allowed to surface. Ramon's attention returned to the woman on the ground. She had said his name, not in fear, not in surprise, in recognition. "Did she say anything else?" he asked quietly. Victor shook his head. Just that. Ramon's gaze lingered on the woman's face. She was younger than he'd expected. Mid-30s, perhaps. Dark hair tangled with leaves and dirt, lashes clumped together by moisture and blood. There was nothing about her that suggested she belonged anywhere near his world. And yet she had known exactly who he was. That knowledge settled heavy in his chest. "Get the med team moving," Ramon said. "Safe house." Victor hesitated. "Hospital." "No hospitals." The word ended the discussion. He lowered the child carefully to the ground, keeping one hand on her shoulder until her legs steadied. She looked up at him, eyes swollen and glassy, searching his face for answers he had not given yet. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria," she whispered. "Stay here," he said. "Victor will take care of you." She didn't move when he released her. Her hand stayed on his jacket, fingers curled tight. "You're not leaving." "Right." Ramon didn't lie. Not yet. It was enough. The men worked in controlled silence, lifting the woman onto a makeshift stretcher improvised from blankets and leather seats. As they carried her toward the waiting car, Ramon walked beside them, his eyes never leaving her face. Inside the vehicle, warmth slowly replaced the biting cold. The woman stirred, a soft sound escaping her throat as consciousness fought its way back. Her lashes fluttered, her eyes opened. This time, she stayed awake. Her gaze moved slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as it landed on Ramon. There was fear there, of course there was, but beneath it lay something else. Calculation, awareness, a quiet understanding that she was no longer at the mercy of the men who had strung her up like a warning sign. "You stopped," she said hoarsely. Ramon leaned closer so she wouldn't have to strain. Yes, they weren't expecting that. No. Her lips curved faintly. Not quite a smile. Neither was I. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. Maria climbed into the seat beside her mother, small hands gripping Elena's fingers like an anchor. The woman's expression softened instantly at the sight of her daughter, fear giving way to something fierce and protective. "You ran," Elena whispered. "I told you to run," Maria nodded, tears slipping free again. "I did. I found him." Elena's eyes returned to Ramon. "Lucky me," she murmured. Ramon studied her carefully now. "You said my name." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "Yes. Why?" The car hummed beneath them as it began to move, tires rolling slowly over dirt and leaves. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the clearing, erasing evidence of what had happened there. Elena closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was no hesitation left. "Because I've seen you before." Ramon's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Where? Not like this," she said. "Not in person." Her breath hitched as pain flared through her body. She forced herself to continue. "At the docks. 3 nights ago. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was working late. I heard voices. I hid." Ramon felt the familiar sensation settle into his spine, the calm before violence. "What did you see?" he asked. Elena met his gaze steadily, enough to know that the men who did this weren't acting alone, enough to know someone wanted me silenced before I could speak to the wrong person. "And you think that person is me?" "No," she said softly. "I think that person is someone who wants you blamed." The car slowed as they reached the safe house, lights glowing faintly through the trees. Ramon held her gaze for a long moment, weighing truth against deception, instinct against experience. "You should have gone to the police," he said. She gave a weak, humorless laugh. "Then my daughter would already be dead." The door opened. Victor was there instantly, ready to move her inside. As they lifted Elena again, she caught Ramon's sleeve, fingers trembling but determined. "They're not finished," she said. "And now that you've helped me, neither are you." Ramon didn't pull away. He looked down at her, at the woman who had survived because he had broken his own rules, and for the first time since stepping into the fog, he understood something with dangerous clarity. Saving her had not ended the problem. It had only given it a name. The safe house stood far from the city, hidden behind layers of silence and intention. From the outside, it looked unremarkable: wood, stone, trees pressed close like natural guardians, but everything about it had been designed for survival. No visible cameras, no lights left on longer than necessary, no names attached to the land. Ramon had built places like this his entire life, never imagining one would be used to shelter a woman who did not belong to his world. Elena was carried inside and laid gently on a bed that felt far too soft after hours of pain. Warmth wrapped around her in slow waves, replacing the forest's cold with something almost unfamiliar. The med team moved with quiet efficiency, cutting away ruined fabric, cleaning wounds, checking circulation, administering fluids. They spoke little. They knew better than to ask questions. Maria stayed glued to her mother's side, refusing to let go of her hand even when exhaustion dragged her eyelids down. Ramon watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his presence filling the room without effort. He did not interfere. He simply observed, committing every detail to memory the way he always did when something mattered. Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. Pain pulled her under, then released her just enough for fragments of reality to resurface. Voices, the hum of machines, her daughter's breathing. And him. Each time her eyes opened, Ramon was there, not looming, not hovering, just present. When the med team finally stepped back, one of them nodded slightly toward Ramon. "She's stable for now. The rope burns did some nerve damage. She'll need time. And rest." Ramon didn't thank him. He never thanked people for doing what they were paid to do. He waited until the door closed, until the room settled into a fragile quiet, broken only by the rhythm of Elena's breathing. She woke fully an hour later. The pain was still there, deep and aching, but it no longer drowned everything else. Her eyes adjusted slowly, taking in the unfamiliar ceiling, the clean scent of antiseptic, the steady warmth beneath her body. Her first instinct was panic. Her second was to reach for Maria. Her fingers met small, familiar ones. Relief flooded her chest so fast it hurt. "She's sleeping," Ramon said quietly. Elena turned her head. He stood near the window, the city's distant glow barely visible through the trees. In the low light, his face was carved from shadow and control, but his attention was entirely on her. "You brought us here," she said. "Yes." "This place? It's yours." "Yes." She studied him for a long moment, as if measuring the distance between who he appeared to be and who he actually was. "You didn't have to." Ramon met her gaze. "You're right." The honesty surprised her. Elena shifted carefully, wincing as pain flared through her arms. "Then why did you—" He didn't answer immediately. Ramon rarely did. Silence was one of his sharpest tools, and he used it now, letting the question sit between them, heavy and unresolved. "You were going to die," he said finally. She let out a slow breath. "So were you." That earned a faint reaction. Not a smile, not quite surprise, but interest. "You think this is about me," he said. "I know it is." Her voice was steadier now. The men who did this didn't want information. They wanted fear. They wanted a body hanging from a tree where someone important would hear about it. Ramon stepped closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. "And who do you think that someone was?" "You..." The word landed cleanly. Elena continued, forcing herself to stay conscious, to stay present. I was at the docks because I was covering a shift for a friend. I heard arguing. I hid because I knew I shouldn't be there. Her fingers tightened slightly around the blanket. I saw men moving crates that weren't on the manifest. I saw faces I recognized from the news. And I saw one man giving orders who wasn't supposed to be involved. Ramon's eyes darkened. Who? She shook her head. Not yet. Not until I know my daughter is safe. She is, Ramon said without hesitation. Forever, she asked softly. The question cut deeper than she intended. Ramon didn't answer right away. He glanced toward Maria, asleep beside her, small chest rising and falling in a rhythm that had nothing to do with violence or power. As long as you're here, he said, no one touches her. Elena closed her eyes for a brief second, absorbing the weight of that promise. When she opened them again, something had shifted. The man I saw, she said, works for you. Or at least, he pretends to. The room seemed to tighten. His name, Ramon asked. Elias, she said. I heard them call him that. Ramon's jaw clenched, just slightly. Elias had been with him for nearly a decade, loyal, efficient, untouchable, or so he had believed. Elena watched the reaction she had feared and hoped for all at once. That's why they tried to kill me quietly. And when that didn't work, they made an example of me. Ramon turned away, staring out the window again. In the glass, his reflection looked unchanged. Inside, calculations were already unfolding, threads pulling tight around a truth he did not like. You understand what this means, he said. Yes, she replied. It means I can't go back to my life. No, it means my daughter will grow up in the shadow of your enemies. Yes, and it means, she added quietly, that if I stay here, I become your problem. Ramon turned back to her, gaze steady. You already are. The words should have frightened her. Instead, something warm and dangerous unfurled in her chest. Maria stirred beside her, murmuring in her sleep. Elena brushed a gentle kiss against her daughter's hair, then looked back at Ramon. I didn't plan to see what I saw, she said. But I won't pretend I didn't. Ramon nodded once. Good. Elena frowned slightly. Good. Because people who pretend, he said, don't survive long in my world. Their eyes held, something unspoken passing between them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition, of strength, of fear, of lines already crossed. Outside, the fog crept closer to the house, wrapping around it the way it had wrapped around the road earlier that day. Inside, a quiet understanding settled into place. Elena had been seen. And now, so had the man who thought he was untouchable. Night settled over the safe house with deceptive calm. The trees outside stood motionless, as if holding a collective breath, their silhouettes pressed against the windows like silent witnesses. Inside, the house hummed softly with controlled life-low lights, distant footsteps, the faint murmur of men who knew how to exist without being noticed. It was a place built for secrets. And now Elena was one of them. She woke to the sound of rain, not the violent kind that lashed against windows, but a steady, persistent drizzle that soaked into the earth and erased footprints. Her arms throbbed dully, pain blooming each time she shifted. But it was a distant thing now, manageable. What held her still was the weight of awareness settling into her chest. She was alive. Her daughter was alive. And the world she had known before that forest no longer existed. Maria lay curled beside her, small and warm, thumb tucked unconsciously into her palm. Elena watched her for a long moment, memorizing the rise and fall of her breathing, the way her lashes brushed her cheeks in sleep. She had run. She had survived. That knowledge twisted something deep inside Elena, a mix of pride and terror she didn't yet know how to untangle. The door opened quietly. Ramon stepped inside without announcing himself. He carried no weapon in his hands, but Elena knew better than to assume he was unarmed. He rarely was. He stopped a few steps from the bed, eyes moving immediately to Maria before returning to Elena's face. You should rest, he said. I am, Elena replied softly.
just not sleeping. He nodded, as if that made sense. In his world, sleep was a luxury few could afford when truths were still unspoken. "Elias is gone," Ramon said. Elena's breath caught despite herself. "Gone, pulled from his post." Ramon clarified. Quietly. "He won't know why." "Not yet." She studied his expression, searching for cracks. There were none.
But beneath the control, she sensed something shifting, like plates grinding under the surface. "He'll know it was me," she said. "He'll suspect," Ramon replied. "Suspicion makes men sloppy." Elena absorbed that in silence. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. "What happens now?" she asked. Ramon didn't answer immediately. He moved closer, resting one hand lightly on the foot of the bed, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the presence that had already altered the shape of her future. "Now," he said slowly, "you decide how deep you want to go." Her heart thudded painfully. "I didn't choose this." "No." He agreed, "But you're choosing now." She turned her head toward the window, toward the darkness pressing in from all sides. "If I leave," she said, "you'll let me." "Yes." "And if I stay," Ramon met her gaze. "Then there's no halfway back." The truth of that settled between them, heavy and undeniable.
Elena thought of the diner, the familiar clink of dishes, the way she used to measure her days in shifts and schedules. She thought of how fragile that life seemed now, how easily it had been shattered by one wrong place at one wrong time. "I saw more than crates," she said quietly. "I heard names, routes, dates." "I know," Ramon said. She looked at him sharply. "How?" "Because the men who tried to kill you weren't careful enough." His voice hardened slightly. "They talked." A chill ran through her. "You interrogated them?" "Yes." She swallowed, and Ramon's jaw tightened. "They were told to make you an example, not to kill you immediately. Fear lasts longer that way." Elena closed her eyes, a brief tremor running through her body.
Ramon noticed. His hand stilled on the bed, fingers curling slightly, as if restraining something instinctive. "I won't let them near you again," he said. The promise was quiet, absolute. She opened her eyes. "You can't promise that." "I can't," he said. "And I do." Something in his certainty made her chest ache. It would have been easier if he were cruel, easier if he demanded silence, obedience, gratitude. Instead, he stood there offering protection she hadn't asked for and couldn't safely refuse. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Ramon didn't hesitate. "The truth, all of it. And when I give it to you, then I end this." Elena exhaled slowly. "Ending things like this never stays contained." "No," he agreed. "It spreads." Maria stirred, murmuring Elena's name, instinctively. Elena leaned down, pressing her forehead gently against her daughter's hair. When she looked back up, her decision was already written in her eyes. "I'll tell you everything," she said. "But not tonight." Ramon watched her carefully. "Why wait?" "Because once I start," she said, "there's no going back. And I need one night where my daughter sleeps without fear." The request was simple, human. It caught him off guard. Ramon nodded once. "One night." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Elena." She looked up. "You didn't survive because you were lucky," he said. "You survived because you didn't look away." The words stayed with her long after he left. Later that night, Elena lay awake listening to the rain fade into silence. Maria slept peacefully beside her, unaware of the storm still gathering beyond the walls. Elena stared into the dark, replaying every detail she had seen at the docks, every voice, every face. She knew what would happen once she spoke. Lines would be crossed. Blood would be spilled. Ramon Ortega would go to war with someone he had once trusted, and she would be the reason. Somewhere else in the house. Ramon stood alone, phone pressed to his ear, issuing quiet instructions into the night. His voice was calm, controlled, but beneath it ran something sharper, resolve. Betrayal had never surprised him. What surprised him was how much it mattered this time. Because for the first time in years, this was not just about power. It was about keeping a promise he had already made to a woman who had seen too much, and to a child who had trusted the wrong man to stop. Morning arrived without ceremony, no sunlight spilling dramatically through the windows, no birdsong announcing a new beginning, just a pale gray sky and the quiet efficiency of a house that never truly slept. Elena woke before Maria, her body stiff and aching, pain blooming slowly as sensation returned to places that had gone numb for too long. She lay still, listening, orienting herself to a reality that felt both safer and far more dangerous than the one she had lost. Footsteps moved outside the door, measured, familiar. Ramon entered carrying a small tray water, pain medication, something warm that smelled faintly of ginger and citrus. He set it down on the bedside table without comment. The gesture was so unexpected it unsettled her more than any threat could have. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I know." She studied him as she shifted into a more upright position, suppressing a wince. "Then why did you—" He met her gaze, unflinching. "Because you're still here." The simplicity of the answer left her momentarily speechless. She took the glass, fingers brushing his for the briefest second. The contact sent a strange awareness through her, sharp and unwelcome, as if her body were betraying her better judgment. Maria stirred beside her, eyes fluttering open. When she saw Ramon, she sat up immediately, alert, as if afraid he might disappear if she didn't look directly at him. "Did they come back?" she asked. "No," Ramon said. "They won't." She considered this, searching his face with the solemn seriousness only children possessed. Then she nodded, satisfied, and leaned back against her mother, sleep already reclaiming her. Elena watched the exchange, something tight and fragile loosening in her chest. "She believes you," Elena said softly. Ramon's expression darkened, just slightly. "That makes it my responsibility." Later, when Maria was settled with Victor in the adjoining room, Elena told Ramon everything. She spoke slowly at first, carefully, as if each word needed to be tested before being released. She described the docks in more detail, the containers marked for agricultural equipment that weren't the altered shipping schedules, the names spoken too casually by men who believed no one was listening. She described Elias's voice, confident and calm, giving instructions that didn't match the paperwork. Ramon listened without interrupting. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, gaze fixed on the trees outside. The more she spoke, the heavier the silence became. "They were moving money through a shell company tied to one of your offshore accounts," Elena said finally. "If it's exposed, it won't just look like corruption. It'll look like you ordered it." Ramon closed his eyes briefly. "They wanted a scapegoat." She continued. "Someone powerful enough to take the fall, but distant enough that they could claim ignorance. And you," he said, voice low, "were meant to disappear." "Yes." The word settled between them like a verdict. When she finished, Ramon turned. The stillness in him had shifted. This was not the calm of patience, but the calm of a man who had reached a conclusion and was already moving toward it. "You can't leave," he said. Elena nodded. "I know. Not just because it's dangerous," he added. "Because once this breaks, everyone involved will be watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake." She looked down at her hands, at the faint tremor she couldn't quite control. "I didn't ask for protection." "No," Ramon said. "You earned it." The words struck harder than she expected. That afternoon, the house changed, guards doubled. Calls were made in voices too quiet to overhear. Ramon disappeared for hours at a time, returning with the faint scent of cold air and something sharper focus, edged with restraint. Elena sensed the shift even without understanding all of it. The safe house was no longer just a shelter. It was a strategic point. As evening fell, Ramon joined her in the kitchen. The space felt oddly domestic, stripped of its tension by the mundane act of cooking. He moved with practiced ease, sleeves rolled up, knife flashing as he prepared something simple and nourishing. Elena watched from the table, unsure how to place this version of him alongside the man who commanded violence with a word. "You're not what I expected," she said before she could stop herself. He didn't look up. "Neither are you." That earned a faint, surprised smile. It faded quickly. replaced by something more serious. "When this is over," she said, "I'll take my daughter and leave." Ramon's hands stilled, back to what he asked quietly. She hesitated. The diner felt impossibly far away now, like a memory from another lifetime, somewhere normal. He turned to face her. Normal doesn't exist anymore. She met his gaze, refusing to look away. It has to. For her. The silence that followed was different, not tense, not hostile, weighted with inevitability. "I won't stop you," Ramon said finally. "But until this ends, you stay. And after." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the gravity that seemed to pull everything into his orbit. "After," he said, "you decide." Their eyes held, something unspoken threading the space between them. Not desire, not yet. Something more dangerous, mutual recognition of what they were becoming to each other. That night, Elena stood by the window long after the house had gone quiet. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees, plans were unfolding, alliances shifting. Ramon was fighting a war she had helped ignite, and she was no longer just an observer. Behind her, he appeared without sound. "I made a promise," he said. She turned, to me, to both of you. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "No one will use you again, not to send a message, not to hide behind my name." Elena searched his face, aware of the weight of such a vow. "And what will it cost you?" Ramon didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes." In that moment, she understood the truth she had been circling since the forest. Saving her had never been an act of mercy. It had been a decision. And once Ramon Ortega made a decision, there was no turning back. The war did not announce itself with gunfire or sirens. It unfolded in silence, in phone calls that ended too quickly, in men who arrived late and spoke less than usual, in routes subtly altered and meetings quietly canceled. Ramon felt it the way he felt changes in weather before clouds gathered, before the air shifted enough for anyone else to notice. Betrayal had a rhythm. Elias was no longer just a name. He was a shadow moving through Ramon's territory, testing boundaries, waiting for weakness. Elena sensed the change as well. The safe house remained secure, but the tension inside it thickened, pressing into every room. Ramon was gone more often now, leaving before dawn and returning long after the sky had turned black again. When he was there, he carried the weight of decisions made and blood not yet spilled. Elena did not ask where he went. She didn't need to. The truth lived in his eyes. One evening, she found him in the study, standing over a table strewn with maps and documents, shipping routes, financial ledgers, names circled in red ink. He didn't look up when she entered, but his awareness of her was immediate, instinctive. "You shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. "I already am," she replied. He exhaled slowly, then nodded toward a chair. "Sit." She did, her gaze moving over the papers despite herself. "You're tightening the net." "Yes, and Elias knows it." "He suspects," Ramon said. "Suspicion keeps him close." Elena folded her hands together, steadying herself. "You're using me as leverage." The words hung between them. Ramon finally looked at her. "I'm protecting you," he said, and drawing him out at the same time. "Yes." The honesty struck her harder than denial would have. "If he makes a move," she said softly, "it won't be against you. It'll be against me. Or Maria?" Ramon's expression hardened, something dangerous flickering beneath the surface. "He won't reach you. You can't guarantee that. I can," he said. "Because he'll come to me first." That night, Maria had a nightmare. Elena woke to the sound of her daughter's breathing hitching, the small body beside her stiff with fear. She gathered Maria into her arms, whispering reassurances until the shaking eased. But when Maria finally fell asleep again, her grip did not loosen. "He's going to leave again," Maria murmured. Half asleep. Elena stilled. "Who?" "The man," Maria said. "The one who stopped." Elena swallowed. "He always comes back." Maria considered this in silence. "Promise?" Elena hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. Ramon stood in the doorway, unseen, hearing every word. "I'll be back before morning," he said.
Maria turned, eyes wide. Relief washed over her face as she nodded, curling back against her mother. Ramon watched them for a moment longer than necessary, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Then he turned and left. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse near the river, a place Ramon had once used to move weapons quietly across the city. Now it was neutral ground, chosen precisely because it no longer mattered. Elias arrived alone, confident enough to believe that meant something. "You've been distant," Elias said, smiling faintly as he approached. "I was starting to think you didn't trust me anymore." Ramon regarded him coolly. "Trust is earned."
"I've earned mine," Elias replied. "For years." "Yes," Ramon said. "That's what makes this interesting." Elias's smile faltered, just slightly. "You pulled me from my roots. You froze accounts without explanation. If there's a problem, we should talk about it." "We are," Ramon said. Silence stretched. "You made a mistake," Ramon continued. "You assumed fear would keep a witness quiet. You underestimated what desperation does to people." Elias laughed softly. "You think I'm responsible for what happened to that woman I heard about that? Tragic. But not my doing." Ramon stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You ordered it." Elias's gaze hardened. "You have no proof." Ramon smiled then, slow and cold. "Not yet." The trap closed in ways Elias didn't immediately recognize. Roots cut off, allies quietly removed. Men who once answered Elias's calls no longer did. Panic crept in at the edges of his confidence. He made mistakes, rushed decisions. And finally, he did exactly what Ramon expected. He reached for Elena. The attempt came at dawn. A car breached the outer perimeter of the safe house, alarms flaring silently as guards intercepted it. The driver fled on foot, leaving behind a message written in desperation and rage. Ramon arrived minutes later, fury coiled tight beneath his calm exterior. Elena stood in the hallway. Maria pressed against her side. When she saw Ramon, relief surged through her so fast it left her dizzy. "It was Elias," she said. "Wasn't it?" "Yes." And now Ramon looked at Maria, then back at Elena. "Now it ends." Later, when the house was secure again. Ramon found Elena alone in the kitchen. She stood at the counter, hands braced against the surface, breathing slowly as if grounding herself. "I don't want to be the reason you become something worse," she said without turning around. Ramon stepped closer. "You're not." "But I am," she insisted. "You've crossed lines because of us." "I crossed lines long before you," he said. "What you've done is remind me why." She turned to face him then, eyes searching. Why what? Why some lines exist in the first place? They stood there, close enough to feel the pull between them. The dangerous intimacy forged not by romance, but by survival. Outside, the sky lightened, dawn creeping in with deceptive gentleness. Elena realized something then. With sudden clarity, Elias was not the most dangerous enemy Ramon faced. It was the part of him that had begun to care. The house did not return to normal after the breach. It adjusted, the way a living organism did after injury, reinforcing weak points, tightening defenses, learning. Guards doubled their shifts. Routes were changed again. Every entry was logged, every shadow questioned. Ramon moved through it all with ruthless efficiency, issuing orders that carried the finality of inevitability. Elias had shown his hand. Now the game could only end one way. Elena felt it in the air. She woke that morning with the strange certainty that something irreversible was approaching. Maria was quieter than usual, clinging to her side even as Victor tried to distract her with breakfast. Children sensed danger long before adults named it. Elena watched her daughter carefully, committing her face to memory in a way that felt uncomfortably like preparation. Ramon found Elena on the terrace just after noon. The sky was a flat, unconvincing blue, sunlight glinting harmlessly off the trees as if the world beyond the walls had not sharpened its knives. "We need to talk," he said. She nodded. "I know." They stood facing each other. No audience, no weapons visible. The intimacy of the moment unsettled her more than the threat itself. "Elias won't stop," Ramon said. "Not now. He believes he's already lost, which makes him dangerous." "You think he'll come again?" "Yes. For me?" Ramon didn't deny it. He'll try. Elena took a steady breath. Then let him. The words echoed between them. Ramon's gaze hardened instantly. No, you said you wanted to end this, she pressed. You said you needed him to make a mistake. He already has. He showed his fear by reaching for us. And I won't give him what he wants, Ramon replied. Elena stepped closer, her voice low but unyielding. He wants control. He wants leverage. And right now, I'm the only thing he thinks he can use against you. That's exactly why this ends with him, Ramon said. And how? She asked. If you don't let him believe he has a chance. Silence stretched, thick and volatile. Ramon turned away, jaw clenched. He had known this moment would come, had feared it. He had built his empire on keeping emotion at a distance, on never allowing anyone to become irreplaceable. Elena had crossed that boundary without asking permission, simply by surviving, by refusing to look away. You're asking me to put you in danger, he said. I'm already in danger, she replied. The difference is whether it's controlled. He faced her again, eyes dark. And if I say no? She held his gaze. Then Elias keeps circling. He keeps trying. And one day, he succeeds. The truth in her words was brutal. Ramon exhaled slowly. If we do this, he said, you do exactly as you're told. Elena nodded. I trust you. The admission surprised them both. The plan was simple, dangerous, effective. Elena would be moved visibly, a controlled relocation, leaked through the channels Elias still believed were intact. A safe house he thought he knew. A window of opportunity narrow enough to feel real. Ramon would remain conspicuously absent, drawing Elias into the belief that this was a moment of weakness, a lapse born of overconfidence. Maria would stay behind, hidden, protected by layers Elias would never reach. When Ramon told Elena that part, her hands trembled. She can't know, she said. She can't think I'm leaving her. I won't let her think that, Ramon said. I promise. That word again. Promise. The night before the move. Elena lay awake listening to the quiet breathing of her daughter. She brushed a hand through Maria's hair, memorizing the softness, the warmth. Fear twisted inside her, sharp and relentless. But beneath it lay something steadier. Resolve. She had not chosen this war, but she would not run from it either. Ramon stood in the doorway, watching. You should sleep, he said softly. So should you. He didn't smile. I don't need it tonight. Elena sat up slowly, wincing as pain still lingered in her arms. If this goes wrong, it won't, he interrupted. And if it does, she continued, I need you to promise me something. His eyes narrowed slightly. I don't make promises lightly. Then listen, she said. If you have to choose between ending this and saving me, you end it. The words cut deep. Ramon stepped closer, towering over the bed, his presence intense enough to make her breath hitch. You don't get to decide that. I do, she said quietly, because I'm the one being used. His hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Instead, he reached out, stopping just short of touching her face. The restraint in that gesture spoke louder than any declaration. You won't be sacrificed, he said. Not by him, not by me. Morning came too soon. Elena left the house under heavy guard, her movements deliberately visible, deliberately imperfect. She played her role with quiet strength, ignoring the way her heart raced each time the car slowed, each time a shadow lingered too long in her peripheral vision. Ramon watched from a distance, unseen, every instinct screaming against the plan he had agreed to. This was the line he had sworn never to cross, using someone he cared about as bait. And yet here he was, walking straight into it. The message came just before dusk, a location, a time. Elias had taken it. Ramon closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. All hesitation burned away. Orders were issued, positions locked into place. There would be no second chances. As the sun sank below the horizon, Elena sat alone in the dimly lit room she had been placed in, fingers curled tightly in her lap. She was afraid. She did not deny it. But beneath the fear was something else trust, dangerous, unreasonable. absolute. She believed Ramon would come. And somewhere in the city, Ramon Ortega prepared to do exactly that, knowing with terrifying clarity that whatever happened next would change him forever. Because winning this war would cost him something he had never intended to give. The place Elias chose was exactly what Ramon expected, and exactly what he feared. An old riverside building, half abandoned, its upper floors condemned, its lower level still wired for power and cameras that no one officially acknowledged. It was the kind of place men used when they wanted control without witnesses, shadows without questions. Elena arrived just before nightfall. The room they led her into was sparsely lit, concrete walls stained with age, a single window overlooking the dark ribbon of water outside. The guards stationed with her were Ramon's men, but they played their roles convincingly nervous glances, too much silence, the subtle posture of people aware they were exposed. Everything about the scene was designed to whisper vulnerability. Elena sat on the edge of a chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart hammered so hard she wondered if it would give her away. She focused on breathing, on keeping her face calm, on trusting the plan even as every instinct screamed for her to run. Minutes passed. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. Elias entered alone. He looked almost disappointed at first, as if he'd expected something more dramatic. Then his gaze landed on Elena, and satisfaction flickered across his face. "You really are brave," he said lightly. "Or very stupid." Elena lifted her chin. "You tried to kill me. I tried to silence you," he corrected. "There's a difference." He circled her slowly, assessing. "Do you know how rare it is for someone like you to survive something like that? You should have taken it as a warning, and you should have finished the job." She replied quietly. Elias smiled thinly. "Perhaps, but fear travels farther than a corpse." The air shifted. Elena felt it a second before the gunshot shattered the silence. It came from outside the building, a sharp crack, precise, controlled. One of the guards by the door went down instantly. Chaos erupted in the hallway, shouts overlapping, boots pounding concrete. Elias swore under his breath, reaching for his weapon. Ramon moved. He came through the opposite entrance like a force of nature, gun already raised, eyes locked on the room. Another shot rang out. Another body fell. Ramon didn't slow, didn't hesitate, didn't think. He moved on instinct, on the promise he had made, on the single, terrifying truth that had been clawing at him since the plan began. If Elena died here, nothing else would matter. Elias dragged Elena up roughly, pressing the barrel of his gun against her ribs. "Drop it!" he snarled as Ramon stepped into view. "Or she dies." Ramon stopped. For the first time since this war began, the world narrowed to one point. One woman, one decision. Elena's breath hitched as she felt the cold metal through her clothes. She looked at Ramon. Searching his face, there was no fear there, no hesitation. Only a storm of controlled violence barely contained. "She's not your way out," Ramon said calmly. "She's the only thing you care about." Elias shot back. "You broke your own rules for her. You crossed lines you swore never to cross." Ramon took a single step forward. "Let her go!" Elias laughed, sharp and unhinged. "You know what your mistake was. You let yourself feel something, and men like us don't survive that." His finger tightened. Elena didn't think. She acted. She twisted sharply, slamming her elbow back into Elias's ribs with every ounce of strength she had left. The gun fired, the shot going wide as Ramon lunged at the same instant. The sound was deafening, the space exploding into movement and noise. Ramon reached her just as Elias fell back, blood blossoming across his shirt. But before Ramon could pull Elena free, another shot rang out. Elena cried out, pain tearing through her side. Ramon's world fractured. He caught her as her knees buckled, lowering her to the floor, hands already slick with blood. For a terrifying second, he couldn't tell how badly she was hurt. All he knew was the sound she made, a small, broken sound that stripped away every layer of control he had left. "Stay with me," he said, voice low and urgent. "Elena, look at me." Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. "You said you'd come. I'm here," he said fiercely. "I'm right here." Elias tried to move. Ramon didn't even look at him. A single shot ended the attempt. Silence rushed in, heavy and absolute. Ramon pressed his hand against Elena's wound, applying pressure, his mind calculating even as panic threatened to overwhelm him. The injury was bad but not fatal. He knew that. He needed it to be true. "Elena," he said again. "Breathe." She managed a faint smile. "You broke the plan. You broke it first," he replied. Sirens sounded in the distance, not police, but Ramon's extraction team closing in. He lifted her carefully, holding her against his chest, uncaring of the blood soaking through his clothes. As they moved out of the building, Elena's head rested against his shoulder. Her voice was barely audible. "Did we win?" Ramon tightened his grip. Yes, but even as he said it, he understood something with devastating clarity. This wasn't victory. It was the moment everything changed. Because in choosing Elena over the clean end of the war, Ramon Ortega had crossed a line he could never uncross. And for the first time in his life, he didn't regret it. Elena woke to silence. Not the fragile, waiting silence of fear, but the deep, settled kind that came after something irreversible had passed. The air smelled clean, faintly of antiseptic and rain. Soft light filtered through sheer curtains, brushing against her eyelids until she stirred, disoriented, searching for pain and finding it muted, distant, held at bay. She tried to move. "Don't," a voice said quietly. Ramon sat beside the bed, his presence immediately grounding, unmistakable even before she opened her eyes fully. He looked different now, not wounded, not shaken, but altered, as if something inside him had shifted permanently, rearranging the shape of who he was. "Where?" Her voice came out rough. "Another safe house," he replied. "More secure. Doctors say you'll heal." She exhaled slowly, relief loosening a knot she hadn't realized she was still holding. "Maria asleep. Next room?" Elena turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was too much between them now. Too many moments where fear had brushed dangerously close to something deeper, something that refused to be named yet demanded acknowledgement. "You stayed," she said. "Yes. You didn't have to." "I know." She studied his face, seeing exhaustion he had not allowed himself to feel until now. "Elias gone," Ramon said simply, "and with him, anyone who thought they could hide behind my name. The war was over, not cleanly, not quietly, but decisively." Elena closed her eyes for a brief second, absorbing the weight of survival. When she opened them again, her gaze sharpened, and now Ramon leaned back slightly. "Now things settle. My organization will stabilize. The accounts will be cleaned. The noise will die down." "And us?" she asked. The question hovered, fragile and dangerous. Ramon didn't answer immediately. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at a garden enclosed by high walls and careful distance. "You'll be safe," he said finally. "No one will come after you. Not anymore." She waited. "You can leave," he added. There it was, the offer he had promised. Freedom, distance, a return to something resembling normal. Elena swallowed. "And if I stay?" Ramon turned back to her, eyes unreadable. "Then you stay because you choose to, not because you're afraid." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Elena thought of the diner, the life she had lost, the simplicity that now felt almost foreign. She thought of Maria's laughter echoing through hallways once built for secrets. She thought of the man standing in front of her, who had shattered his own rules to keep her alive. "I don't know how to belong in your world," she said quietly. "You don't have to," Ramon replied. "I won't ask you to." The door opened softly, and Maria peeked inside, eyes bright with cautious hope. When she saw Elena awake, she rushed forward, climbing onto the bed with careful enthusiasm, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck. "You're okay," Maria breathed. Elena held her tightly. "I am." Maria turned to Ramon, studying him with the same serious gaze she always used when deciding whether to trust. "You didn't disappear," she said. "No," Ramon replied. "I won't." She nodded, satisfied, then rested her head against Elena's shoulder. The simple intimacy of the moment settled something deep in Elena's chest. Later that day, Elena stood outside for the first time since the warehouse. The sun was low, warm against her skin, the world improbably normal. Ramon stood a short distance away, giving her space without leaving. "You could build something different," she said suddenly. "You don't have to keep doing things the same way." He looked at her. "Change doesn't come easily." "I know," she said, "but neither does staying the same." Ramon considered her words carefully. She had always spoken to him like this, without fear, without pretense. It was part of what had undone him. "I've already started," he said quietly. She met his gaze, understanding flickering between them. "For us?" "For her," he said, nodding toward Maria, who was chasing light across the garden. Then he added, "And maybe for you." The admission hung in the air, raw and unguarded. That evening, Elena found Ramon alone in the study, the same room where maps and plans had once spread like warning signs. Now the table was clear. "You're really letting me choose," she said. "Yes." She stepped closer, stopping just short of touching him. "If I stay," she said slowly, "it won't be as something you protect. It'll be as someone who stands beside you." Ramon held her gaze. "That's the only way I'd allow it." Their hands met, tentative, the contact sending a quiet shock through them both. Not desperation, not fear. Something steadier, earned. Outside, the city continued on, unaware of the war that had ended in its shadows. Inside, something new began to take shape, not yet happiness, not yet peace, but the possibility of both. Elena leaned into him, just slightly. Ramon did not pull away. For the first time since the foggy road where everything had begun, the future did not feel like a threat. It felt like a choice. The season changed quietly. There was no announcement, no dramatic marker to declare that danger had passed. Winter receded into memory, replaced by a gentler light that lingered longer each day. The safe house no longer felt like a fortress. It became, slowly and almost against its will, a home. Elena noticed it first in the small things. The way Maria laughed more easily now, her fear loosening its grip as days stacked peacefully on top of one another. The way guards greeted her with familiarity instead of formality. The way Ramon no longer stood apart in every room, watching from the edges, but allowed himself to exist within the space he occupied. They did not rush what followed. Ramon did not make promises of forever. Elena did not ask for them. What grew between them did so carefully, built from shared mornings and unspoken understanding, from conversations that drifted late into the night and silences that felt safe instead of sharp. One afternoon, Elena found Ramon in the garden, kneeling beside a young tree that had recently been planted. His sleeves were rolled up, hands stained with earth, expression focused in a way she had come to recognize not calculation, not control, but intention. "You're planting something," she said. He glanced up, a rare softness crossing his features. "Yes." For protection, she teased gently. "For roots," he replied. She stepped closer, watching as he pressed soil into place. "You've never been a man who stayed still." "No," he agreed. "But I'm learning the difference between standing guard and standing ground." The truth of that settled warmly in her chest. Later, as dusk fell, Maria ran through the garden, chasing fireflies with unrestrained delight. She stopped suddenly, turned back toward them, and said with absolute seriousness, "You know, this place doesn't feel scary anymore." Elena smiled. Ramon said nothing, but something inside him eased. That night, after Maria had fallen asleep, Elena stood by the window, looking out over the quiet grounds. Ramon joined her, close but not touching, as if still giving her the space to choose. "I used to think survival was enough," Elena said softly. "I thought if we made it through, that was the victory." And now, Ramon asked, "And now I think living matters more." He turned toward her fully. "You're not trapped here." "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm staying." The words were simple. They did not need ceremony. Ramon reached for her then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away. She didn't. When his hand found hers, The contact felt inevitable rather than new, as if they had been moving toward this moment since the foggy road where everything had begun. "I don't know how to give you a normal life," he said quietly. "I don't want normal," Elena replied. "I want honest. I want safe. I want us choosing each other every day, not because we have to, but because we can." His grip tightened slightly. "I can give you that." In the weeks that followed, Ramon dismantled parts of his empire with deliberate care. Routes were closed, operations ended, power was redistributed, not in acts of redemption, but in calculated steps toward sustainability. He did not become a different man overnight. He became a man willing to change direction. Elena returned to work, not at the diner she had left behind, but in a place Ramon helped build, a small cafe near the edge of the city, quiet and unremarkable, designed to feel like a beginning instead of a hiding place. Maria started school nearby, her days filled with new friends and stories that no longer carried shadows. And Ramon learned how to arrive home without scanning exits first. One evening, months later, they returned to the forest road. The fog was gone. Sunlight filtered through tall trees, illuminating the stretch of pavement where everything had once stopped. They stood there together, Elena holding Maria's hand, Ramon just behind them, close enough to feel, far enough to let them lead. "This is where you found me," Maria said thoughtfully. "This is where you ran," Elena corrected gently. Maria nodded. "And where he stopped." Ramon met Elena's gaze over Maria's head, the weight of that truth passing between them without words. He had stopped that day without knowing why. Now he understood. Sometimes, the most dangerous decision was not moving forward. It was choosing to stay. As they walked back toward the car, Maria skipped ahead, carefree and unafraid. Elena slipped her hand into Ramon's, fingers fitting naturally, as if they had always belonged there. The road stretched behind them, no longer a place of fear or fate, but simply part of a story that had already been lived. And for the first time, the future did not feel like a threat to outrun or a battle to prepare for. It felt like a life earned, chosen, and finally, fully theirs.